Jordan Hawkins and CJ McCollum showed out for the Pelicans on Sunday, and I'll tell you why that's more important than you think. It's the Monday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Monday. We got a whole week's worth of shows. Hopefully no more internet outages here for me over at Locked On Pelicans headquarters. But we're going to cover a lot of the draft. We're going to be, of course, talking about the two games over the weekend in today's show. I want to look at Jordan Hawkins, CJ McCollum. We'll get into Cooper Flagg beating VJ Edgecombe in the tournament. They got to change some of the sloppiness on this team going into next season. A better attention to detail. That is important, and I'll explain why. That's going to be all in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. Let me know if you're an everydayer in the comments down below. So let's get into the weekend's games. And I don't know if we're going to spend much time talking about the 134-93 loss to the Minnesota Timberwolves. No Zion Williamson in that one. Basically just not a whole lot of anything in that one. CJ McCollum not playing well, 15 points on 15 shot attempts. He was 1 of 7 from 3. You also had Jordan Hawkins go 1 of 4 from 3 for 10 total points. Not just not a memorable night for really anybody, if we're truthfully looking at it from there. So there's not much to really take away from that. I thought the game against Detroit was a little bit more interesting. The Pistons were without Cade Cunningham in this one. No Jaden Ivey, kind of missing some guys that they normally end up having play, and Tim Hardaway's now out for the season. So this was a more evenly matched game, I think, for the Pelicans, and this is why they were much closer in this one, 136-130, fighting hard until the very end there. And it took, one of the big reasons for that is 40-point game from CJ McCollum, and to a lesser extent, a 25-point game from Jordan Hawkins as well. They combined to make 11 threes in this game. CJ was 5 of 12. Hawkins was 6 for 11. Those are all really good numbers, and you need that sort of performance from both of these guys, and for various reasons here. When it comes to CJ McCollum, if this team wants to be truly competitive next year, it's likely going to be with him on the roster, involved in some way, playing a role, shooting, spacing the court. He's been very, very good, and he's creeping up the all-time leaderboards in terms of three-pointers made. You've seen him in the top 20 now, and he's getting close to, I think, 16, 18, something like that in one of those spots here. So you need his value to be at an all-time high by him playing well, either so if he's on your team next year, he plays well because you're going to need good players and the West is going to be tough and you're going to be without, DeJounte Murray to start the year. We don't know about Herb Jones or Trey Murphy yet. There's concerns about that. CJ is going to need to take on a much bigger role if that's going to be the case. And for Jordan Hawkins, it's going to be the same thing as well. He played 30 minutes off the bench in this one. They're very much going to need him to go out and play well and shoot. And while he has some very real limitations, and he does, he's not a great rebounder. He moves the ball enough, but he's not a good defender. He does get lost out there at times. He has to shoot, and he has to shoot well. He's not more than a shooter. So if he is going to be a somewhat one-dimensional player, then you need him to do that one thing exceptionally well. And so for him to have a bounce-back game where the team played better as a whole, and, he's taking on a more outsized role and he nails those kind of three-pointers that he was making in this one, that's a really good thing. He showed off some pretty tough shot making in this game. And while you don't really want him taking tough shots, certainly, I don't think it's as bad right now with this sort of thing because whatever. Who else is going to do this sort of thing? So him going out and showing that he's still capable of doing this at an exceptionally high level against a team in the Detroit Pistons that has a very good defense this year is somewhat encouraging. Look, he's still shooting 33% from three on the year. That's not going to get it done. He does need to be closer to 40% from three. I don't know how realistic that is. Maybe he makes that jump next year, but he's going to need to play a big role for this team, assuming he's on the roster. So they need him to make the most of these final 10 games of the regular season for the Pelicans and see if you can maybe get him turning a corner. So it does not feel like that has been the case for him whatsoever. But look, we want the team to lose. Maybe you don't. I do. At this point, tanking's kind of important here. And playing him a bunch and letting him figure things out works for me. That's why I don't mind not seeing Zion Williamson in this game. That's why, the game against the Minnesota Timberwolves is just kind of like, whatever when it comes to that sort of thing. At least Antonio Reeves played well in that game with 11 points, perfect 5 of 5 from the field here. And he didn't get much run in this game, which is a little confusing to me, but at least you're starting to see some of these young guys get those minutes, go out and play well. Keon Brooks Jr. got 20 minutes of action in this one. They just signed Alfred Payton to a 10-day contract. He played in the Minnesota game, did not play well, did not play in this game against Detroit either. And here's the other thing with CJ McCollum and Jordan Hawkins. If they're playing well to end the season here, does that increase their trade value potentially? I don't think there is a ton of trade value out there right now for Jordan Hawkins. CJ's a little bit tougher to try and quantify, especially because of what his contract is. But Hawkins, you could conceivably move as a young player that's somewhat interesting, except if he's not doing that one thing well, what are you going to do? But if he shoots the ball lights out or really well to end the season over these final 10 games, does that increase his trade value where now in the offseason you can point to that when you're trying to sell, a trade partner on what Jordan Hawkins could be capable of doing, the type of player who he could be. So I do think that this could be a really good run for him, but he's going to need to do it consistently over these final 10 games. He has not done that. I am concerned if that will end up being the case or not, or if we will end up seeing him do that sort of thing. So we'll see, but I do think it is rather important that he does go out and that he does play well, and that you need to see that so that this team can try and get some value or have these guys ready to go for next season, because you're going to need it with the injuries that they're dealing with right now. So coming up next, I want to look at something that's been plaguing the Pelicans all season long, and it's something that they, regardless of anything for next year, coach, front office, all that, players, this can't keep happening. And I'll tell you what that is coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Rocket Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's pretty easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center, so you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop managing your money and start building wealth. You might not even realize how much you spend on food delivery. So this is going to allow you to budget and save more. And managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. And don't forget about the free daily Locked On Pelicans newsletter delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pelicans newsletter. So there was something that jumped out to me, and it's been jumping out to me all season long here, certainly. But there's something that really jumped out to me in this game and at the end of the first quarter. And it's something that you've seen the Pelicans do repeatedly, and they do not close quarters well. In fact, this, to me, kind of is a pretty sloppy team, it feels like. This is a team that lacks some of that like attention to detail, closing quarters hard and things like that. And you really saw that in this game as the Pelicans were kind of making it somewhat close in the first quarter and trying to kind of keep this one a little bit more interesting than it could have been. New Orleans was right there, and then they ended up losing the first quarter by 9, 36-27 for a couple of reasons. They had an opportunity for a 2-for-1 where you try and get 2 possessions to your opponent's 1 possession right at the end of the game. You can in theory do this around 40 to 50 seconds left in the quarter, where if you take an early shot and leave that much time left, if they use the full shot clock or close to it, you'll get the ball back and be able to end that quarter with having that possession yourself. And so it can be a pretty powerful advantage. This is something that, for the longtime fans of basketball here in New Orleans, Chris Paul was exceptional at. That was one of my favorite things watching him play, was how he basically always made sure the team was in position for a 2-for-1 opportunity. And that's playing with pace. That's a smart thing to do. And you saw this team completely botch it on a Jeremiah Robinson-Earl 3 that left them no time left whatsoever because no one moved. They just kind of stood around, and you gave 24 seconds left to the Detroit Pistons in that quarter. So the Pelicans had an opportunity for a 2-for-1 and kind of let the Pistons turn it into a 2-for-1. And that was not the Pistons like imposing their will or doing anything like that, right? It was just simply the Pelicans not getting it, not realizing it, right? There were 17 turnovers in this game too. And look, when you're playing worse guys, that's going to be a little bit of an expectation here. But it was also the case when they played the Pistons previously in New Orleans. That was the 40-something point loss. And as you watch this team, and they've had a number of 40-point losses this season, it's been kind of rough. That lack of attention to detail, understanding what's going on, just really comes through with this team. They struggle closing out quarters and let the other team basically always get the momentum. And that is a very real thing that becomes a problem in New Orleans. And look, if you want them to lose, sure, but you don't want them to lose by 40 or get run out the building in this way. It's embarrassing. They don't want that, but they're just regularly letting that happen right now. And that's very disappointing. I don't know if that's coaching, if that's the players, little column A, little column B, easily could be kind of all of those things here. But this is something that needs to get fixed. This is something that needs to get fixed going forward because you can't keep doing this, right? They had 25 freaking turnovers against the Minnesota Timberwolves on Friday, right? Like, that's unacceptable. I don't care who's playing, who isn't playing. Like, you just can't do that, right? 17 against the Pistons here. 5 for Kelly Olynyk alone, right? Hawkins had 3 off the bench. Jose Alvarado, your starting point guard, with 2. Like, you can't keep committing these type of turnovers and letting the opponents just get easy buckets in that way here. And that has been a problem now for a while for New Orleans, and that's something that needs to change next year. Like, there just needs to be better attention to detail. One of the things that kind of struck me about the Lakers earlier on in the year with a rookie head coach in JJ Redick was they looked like they pay attention to detail. And you see that even now with some of the things that they're doing and the limitations of that roster. And they're still winning games because they're doing all of those little things well and smart and playing hard. And you contrast it to New Orleans and you don't see that. And even when New Orleans was healthy, did you really see that? Did you see that last year for this team either? And I don't think the answer to that is, a resounding yes. And that's a problem. Is some of that coaching? Absolutely. Is a lot of that on the players too? Yeah. Kelly Olynyk can't have 5 turnovers. There's no amount of coaching that's going to stop him from doing that sort of thing, especially if you're overmatched to a degree as well. So this needs to be like a point of emphasis in the offseason that just everything needs to be like tightened up a little bit, right? And this goes to like Zion too. He was suspended for the game for just showing up late. And that happens more regularly than you probably know and realize in the NBA level, that guys are a couple minutes late, whatever it is, for flights. And you never see suspensions for it. So there's probably something else with that. But Zion needs to commit to this sort of stuff too. We know CJ likely is doing all of that, but this is the type of thing that will add wins to your team next season. This is the type of thing trying to tighten up those turnovers, trying to get better about, the little things here, understanding the shot clock and game clock and knowing when to go for a 2-for-1 and just all of that stuff. That's going to make your team significantly better next season and hopefully get this team back into the playoffs, because that's what you want to see. And that's what the team is hoping for. But if you consistently just give the ball up, make mistakes, mental issues, all of that stuff, you're not going to do that. And so you can have all the talent in the world, I think, but if they're not ready, prepared from coaching, but for themselves too, I think you're going to be in some trouble, right? That's ideally why you want a point guard to kind of limit some of this and take some of that decision-making out of other people's hands and be able to run that 2-for-1 opportunity at the end of quarters. And that's where losing someone like DeJounte Murray really hurts. There's a reason why they signed Elfrid Payton again, right? He was horrible in the 12 minutes he played against the Minnesota Timberwolves, there at the end, and who cares? And, in this one where it's just, he doesn't even play, you need that basketball IQ out there on the court. We talked about this last week when it comes to Kelly Olynyk, that he does have some of that. So to see a 5-turnover game for him is a little bit surprising, though I thought he played overall pretty well in this one. 10 points, 8 assists, 5 rebounds as well, 2 blocks. They need that. You need that, and that needs to be an emphasis on the team going into next year, is just stop shooting yourself in the foot. Sounds kind of nice, right? To avoid doing that sort of thing going forward. And also going forward, come on, play Antonio Reeves more. What are we doing here with some of the decision-making that's going on with this team? When you look at it, I just looked up at the box score again, and I see the 3 minutes played. Why not play him earlier? I get that they were trying to win this game, but you still didn't even do that. And look, there's something to be said for playing to win. And look, the players aren't actively trying to tank. The coaching staff doesn't want to actively tank, and you probably don't want them trying to tank either, truthfully. That would be, in my opinion, a pretty bad thing. But you look at this, and you're like, do the right thing for these final 10 games going forward. Whether Zion's actually injured or not, don't bother me, and I feel kind of good that they're just more or less shutting him down a little bit, because I do think that is the smart thing to do here. So at least they're starting to kind of trend in the correct decision here. So I don't know. I'm excited to see some of these guys get minutes going forward, because that should be kind of fun. So coming up next, guys we want to see in a Pelicans uniform. Cooper Flagg outplaying VJ Edgecombe in the Duke-Baylor game. I want to talk about another player on that team too that I think might be worth keeping an eye on. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And don't forget about Locked On Saints. Host Ross Jackson making sense of everything black and gold over at the Locked On Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I've been watching a ton of the tournament. This is really when I really dive into college basketball, and frankly, it's been pretty fun. That Florida-UConn game was awesome. Some of the other games we've seen have been pretty awesome as well. And I've been just genuinely enjoying it. The tournament's always fun here. But I was really watching, while also watching the Pels game, Duke play Baylor here because of a couple of players, one being Cooper Flagg and the other being VJ Edgecombe, and how he played in this game, and watching those two guys kind of go at it at times, because those are two prospects. Cooper Flag is going to be the number 1 overall pick. VJ Edgecombe, I think, could crack that kind of 4th spot. I don't think he's in the top 3. Maybe he ends up kind of getting in the mix there. But this performance did not do him any favors. And when you look at, who played well in this game and who didn't, Cooper Flag looks like the real deal. Like, that dude's just got everything you want in a player. Everything you want in a player here is basically what he does. He looks absolutely phenomenal. If you don't watch this game, finished with 18 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. He only made 1 3, but it was a nice little step back 3 that he hit. The most important thing to me, though, was the physicality that he played with. One, the defense is very good. He had a block in this game. And then he also got to the line. He was playing downhill. He was aggressive. He was attacking. He went to the free throw line 9 times in this game. The entirety of the Baylor team took 10 total free throws. He almost had as many as the entire Baylor squad did. He was awesome. He's going to be the number 1 overall pick. There's probably nothing that's going to change this going forward here. VJ Edgecombe, on the other hand, I was really excited to watch, and I thought he kind of disappointed me a little bit in this one. Finished with 16 points on the night, was a leading scorer for Baylor, 6 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 of 5 from 3, which wasn't great, 3 of 5 from the free throw line. He was 6 of 12 overall. You see why people are high on him, and he played well enough, but he was definitely significantly outshone by Cooper Flag here, and that's, I don't think it's, sorry, keep coughing, going to impact his draft stock whatsoever. And he played okay in their first round win, a close win over Mississippi State, where he finished with 14 points, did not shoot well on 3 of 8 from the field in that one, but did get to the line there. He had 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 block. Still overall just very talented, but the shooting can be very streaky. And that's something that concerns me a little bit long-term with him, because look, if this team's still going to keep Zion and say you end up with the 4th overall pick, you are going to need shooting. It's as simple as that. You need more of that. We talked about this last week around Zion Williamson. What also probably hurt VJ Edgecombe was he was outshone by Tyrese Proctor from Duke, who finished as a leading scorer for the Duke team with 25 points. He was 9 of 10 from the field. He was 7 for 8 from 3, 1 rebound, 2 assists. He's going to be, I think, a pretty good pro. I've enjoyed watching him play, and the shooting there looks to be very, very real. And you've seen him play, relatively well overall. So I think this is something where when you watch him, he can kind of light it up. He had 19 points in their opening round win over Mount St. Mary's too. So that's the type of thing that you look at and you're like, oh, like he is a pretty good player here, and you want to see him go out and light it up. And he has just been doing that sort of thing. And it's like, oh, yeah, dude's pretty good here. So overall, I've enjoyed watching him play, and I thought he played particularly well in this one too. There's a couple other games today that I'm going to be watching as well, because I'm very curious about some of these other guys that are kind of going to be right on up there when it comes to, I'm trying to pull up the stats and everything here. I'm going to watch the Illinois game later for Kasparis. I'm going to completely butcher the name, even though I've heard it and I struggle pronouncing this for some reason. Yakuchonis is, I believe, how you pronounce it. He's been at times inconsistent this year. I see that they're down by 13 at halftime when I'm recording the show right now, but I'm going to be really curious to watch him play and do a deeper dive on him in the future, because if this team does end up needing a point guard long term, and they probably do, that's someone that will be in that mix from it. They run a bit of a pro-style offense for Illinois, so I think he's the type of guy that could really be in the mix when it comes to everything. BYU with Igor Demon is making a bit of a run here. I'm not as high on him, but that's a really interesting player as well that you want to keep an eye on during the tournament. So There's a lot of basketball to watch out there. Just might not be the Pelicans given the losses and everything. But look, they're still in a good position to end up with the type of draft pick that we want and hope that they end up with here. As of now, I don't know if Charlotte plays today. They're only one game behind Charlotte for that third spot. They've got a cushion against the Brooklyn Nets, which I think is pretty good too. And this game tonight against the Philadelphia 76ers is bound to be super duper stinky. I don't know if that's good or bad or if it's going to be kind of fun or not, but it's going to be 10 more games, y'all. 10 more games going forward is all we got. And so season's going to be over soon, and we'll focus on the draft. We'll focus on trades, all that stuff. So a lot more to come here on Locked On Pelicans. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'll see y'all next time.